as lawmakers head out on the campaign trail. And this means there is a lot to talk about with my next guests. They are the reporters of the Roundtable, intrepid journalists who have been busy all week covering the chaos at the Capitol and also at the campaign trail. Joining us tonight from the Times-Union, they are well represented, are state editor Casey Seiler and political reporter and blogger extraordinaire Jimmy Vielkin. Across the table from them is Michael Gormley. He's the Capitol editor for the Associated Press. Thank you very much for joining me. You're going to have to really hold down your end.
Absolutely.
Okay. So we'll start with you, actually.
Sure. Well, they, as you said, 4 months late. They passed a budget. It's many people consider that the most important thing the legislature does all year. Took them a long time to do it, and they ended up with, which I think the most amazing thing to me is, they ended up basically with Governor Patterson's budget. It increased spending about 2%, if you don't count that $2 billion that they had to roll over from last year. So it's about inflation rate, which is amazing for Albany. But for 2 years now, we've been hearing how weak Governor Patterson is, and all of a sudden he has his own budget like no governor's ever done before. He issued thousands of vetoes, millions of dollars of spending that the legislature wanted, including pork barrel spending. But we have a budget.
He got almost everything he wanted. He didn't get wine in grocery stores. He didn't get the fat tax. That's the tax on soda. And instead, he got the reimposition of the clothing tax, the sales tax for clothing under $110.
Which he admits is actually not progressive, is bad for poor people. He said it right himself. He's like, this is a bad thing, and yet we did it anyway.
Right, and he's attacking the legislators for that, but Mike is absolutely right. He got 90% of what he wanted. And I think the other dominant theme from this budget process is that the Senate, hobbled by that narrow 32-30 majority, is really having trouble delivering and is really having trouble making a deal. The reason that this fight dragged out for another month beyond June 28th, July 1, when everyone seemed to be ready to close it down and when the governor said, you know, the future would end on June 28th,
oh, that's right.
it feels like so long ago. But the reason it got dragged out is because Bill Stokowski, the Democratic senator from Buffalo, said he was not prepared to support the final budget bill until action was taken on the SUNY-CUNY empowerment legislation. And so it's once again this kind of one person can defect and throw the whole train off the tracks that hobbled things along. And other senators figured it out in the last days, which was great because it used to be.
That was amazing to see that.
Just the amigos used to do it, and now everyone's realized that they too can throw the Senate into chaos.
They too can be a one-man protest machine.
We all woke up on Tuesday and we thought, well, this is the day it's all going to get done. And then even before they went in, we had the press release from Pedro Espada saying, oh, I'm not showing up unless I get the Farm Workers' Bill of Rights on the agenda.
Didn't he get the Farm Workers' Bill of Rights on the agenda?
And showed up by 2 o'clock and with all due speed. And then, of course, everybody was looking around wondering why Tom Dwayne's seat was empty. Well, in fact, he, much like, you know, Liz Taylor on the set of Cleopatra, was waiting in his waiting in his office until a piece of his own legislation could end up on the agenda as well. It is in miniature, that's the situation that the Senate has been facing for the last 18 months now.
Well, let's talk about that SUNY empowerment deal. Okay, was it a deal or was it not a deal? Mike, you want to try? Because I do not know. Bill Stokowski was here, and he said to us right into the camera, oh, yes, it was a deal. I don't think it was a deal. No details.
Yeah, good amount of skepticism on that. The SUNY empowerment deal, just very quickly, I'm sure you've been covering it, it would give SUNY a lot more power to grow, to become some of the top institutions in the country, also set their own tuition and raise it fairly regularly. There was a deal. The deal required Shelley Silver, the Assembly Speaker, to join this, to say, okay, I'll do something on it, because he was completely opposed to everything.
Oh, yeah.
So there was a deal to that point with the details of would be 3% increase in tuition or 2%, those kinds of details, yet to be worked out. That's where it never became a bigger deal. So I think there was a deal at one point.
Was it deal-lit?
It was a deal-lit. And then to get enough votes to pass the budget and so all the legislators could get paid, they said, we have this, what do they call this, framework, right? Framework. They put it out, and no one seems to know what that means. So I don't think there's any kind of a deal to go forward here.
What does it mean for Bill Stokowski, though? I mean, some people said, actually, this broke in the middle of an Insider segment on this set, and I heard in my ear, the budget is done. So I said, the budget is done. And then we tried to figure out what that meant. But what it meant also, in the eyes of one insider, was Bill Stokowski might be dead.
Well, yeah. Stack has been in elected office for over 2 decades. When the Democrats won in 2008, there were cheers in Buffalo, and after he had staved off a vigorous challenge from Dennis Delano, the former police detective, they said, and here's Bill Stakowski. He's going to be the chairman of finance. He's finally going to have power, influence, and he's going to bring home the bacon for Western New York.
No.
So what did Western New York want? They wanted this one thing, and if it gets done in some, halfway manner, if it gets done eventually after all this stalling, it's become clear that Stakowski didn't have the juice to make it happen.
And on the floor, during that vote, the protracted vote, when of course it got pulled once and then it came back out and then it got pulled finally for the day, the Sunni Empowerment Bill vote in the Senate, it went on for a long, long time, and there were many breaks in the action. And Mike and I were both on the floor, and it was very dramatic, and it was the kind of people going over and whispering and kind of begging and pleading. Antoine Thompson, who's Stakowski's colleague from Buffalo, was all over the place working the room on the Democratic conference side, including even, I think, there were a couple of overtures made to a few Republicans, knowing that this was probably going to be a one-house bill, just to kind of get it done so we could move on.
There are Republicans from that area. There are Western New York Republicans. They're out there.
Want to see the University of Buffalo aided as well. But Stakowski's body language spoke volumes. He sat there, he gave almost a desultory speech in support of the legislation, and as Thompson's jumping around, as Jeff Klein is working the room as well furiously, Stakowski just kind of sat there. It was really almost like he had just, received a terminal diagnosis or something like that.
He's not a really dynamic speaking kind of a guy.
Yes.
But yet he is well liked. I mean, for a while he was, Mark Schroeder, who's the assemblyman out there, said he was a hero. I mean, really, he was very much championed. It's just, he's got a difficult time of it. He's got a primary challenge from Tim Kennedy. He's got Jack Quinn, a young upstart assemblyman whose father was a public